I'll introduce you guys. Hey, everybody. We're going to get started here. I know part of the great thing around these conferences, the ideas that happen during the break, I always kind of joke with our team that people really care more about what happens outside the stage than on the stage, which I think is a great piece of this. We're going to get started and continue on with our kind of great conference here and content. But one of the things that I think is really important that we start discussing is the opportunity that exists for regional collaboration through autonomy. So when we think about autonomy, the drone, the car, for it to get to its full opportunity, it's not going to stop at the state line. So that's why I'm excited to welcome up our two next speakers. We have the North Dakota DOT Director, Bill Panos, and Jenny Krausen, who is the Connected Automated Vehicle Director for Minnesota DOT. So we'll welcome them up to the stage here. Yeah, how about that? And so this is a fireside chat. So they did request to see if we could get a fireside up there. So I'm not sure if that's possible.
These are embers.
Yes, those are embers burning to excite the and ignite automation. So we'd love just to start with a little bit of introductions, and maybe if you could tell us about, Jenny, we'll start with you, about what's happening in Minnesota when it comes to autonomy, and then we'll turn it over to you, Director Panos.
Sure. Well, we've got a lot of great things happening in Minnesota, but we're really happy to be here in North Dakota today, or at least I am. And I was up here just last week, actually, Bill. We were doing one of the things right now that we're working on, something called Drive Minnesota. So we've been in pursuit of understanding this dilemma around what should we be doing on the agency side to prepare our infrastructure for vehicle automation. So we did a drive around the state, stopped in Moorhead. So I was just in the area last week with the intention to see how is vehicle automation interacting with pavement markings, our road surface. So Drive Minnesota is one exciting thing we've got going on. We've got a few demonstration projects in urban, rural, and suburban settings, Rochester, White Bear Lake, and soon to be Grand Rapids. So not too far of a jaunt if folks want to head over to Grand Rapids in a couple of weeks here and check out the automated vehicle shuttle project that we're doing in more of a rural setting to provide some on-demand service. So we've had a few things going on, some similarity with North Dakota. We're also testing out some lead-follow technology with our fleet vehicles to see how we can use that in our work zone operations. But you've got some really exciting things going on here in North Dakota on the aerial side of things. So it's great to be here.
Great, awesome. Well, Director Panos, we'll turn it over to you.
So, well, there's so much happening in this space. First of all, I want to extend my gratitude to everyone that put this conference together and all the folks here on the campus as well. Thank you so much for having us and for having this conversation. These conversations are really important, not just because of this type of conversation where we're sharing information about what we're doing, but also everything that happens out in the hallway is very, very important. So again, gratitude to you for having us here from Indy DOT. We have a number of our staff here as well. Our organization, the Department of Transportation, and I think departments of transportation around the country are transforming. And they're transforming in a number of different ways. Workforce is a transformation element for us. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a transformation element for us. But certainly the use of technology and autonomy is a transformation element for us. And when we talk about transportation automation, we're not just talking about, obviously, surface transportation or vehicles. We're talking about in the aviation space, as we've talked about earlier this morning. We're talking about it in the transit space. We're talking about it in the fleet, ocean fleet, maritime space as well. There are a number of different places around the country and around the world, really, that are transforming with autonomy and technology now that we can, now that the elements are in place now for us to be able to move this forward. And I can't express enough to the gratitude that we have with our university and research partners around the country. Our university research and corporate partners around the country have been an essential element for us to move autonomy forward. So in North Dakota, I'll just hit a couple of quick things. First, We are looking at autonomy both outward-facing and inward-facing into our organization. So inward-facing means, for us, is acceptance of technology in terms of how we design things, how we plan things, and then how we actually run our operations. Remember, it's a really big organization, one of the largest in the state, and we are responsible for mobility and safety around the state for all goods and people. And so that's why we interface almost with everybody's life every single day. If you have a driver's license, you interface with DOT. So I think that we recognize that, and our programs, internal programs, help our engineers, our planners, our administrators understand how autonomy affects them and affects their job and the mission that they're on and how they deploy that mission. And so that's a very complex sort of part of our job, and we don't have enough time to talk about it today, but it's really interesting what's happening in people's work and in their minds and in their lives inside of the DOTs that are asked to deliver these mission sets each and every day. The external facing is a lot of what we talk about in organizations like this, or in events like this. And so we in our space, let me just pick three external facing systems. We have something called attenuators. They're basically safety vehicles that are behind vehicles that are on a highway or a road. You see them. Sometimes they'll have flashing digital message signs, or they'll have other kinds of flashing indicators that say, you know, move to the left, please, don't hit our vehicle, which, by the way, they're hit frequently. It's remarkably it's remarkable that it happens, and it's really, really a problem for us. And we could talk about that all day too. So we're building automated attenuators, because the attenuators actually do get hit, and we'd rather not have a person in that vehicle. And so we're automating that with the help of a lot of private sector partners and university partners, and we're so fortunate to have that. The second is we, I don't know if you've noticed, but we mow a lot of grass. By the way, they have great grass here. I just noticed on this campus, it's amazingly good grass. But can you imagine mowing it? Can you imagine mowing thousands of miles of it? Every year, twice a year.
With cars going by about 70 miles an hour or faster.
Exactly. So if we can develop automated mowing technology for our use, just for our use in operations in mowing grass along interstates, that's it. Very focused, very, very finite sort of thing. It would be used by every DOT in the country, every DOT in the country. And so we intend to do that here with our university partners and private sector partners. And then the last is really getting ready for automated vehicles, and really connected vehicles first, and then automated vehicles second. And we're starting the process of doing that with our transportation management centers, our corridor along the I-29 corridor, and then building some of the hardware and software associated with connecting vehicles.
Great, awesome. So this conference is meant to connect the policymakers with the autonomous industry. So we have some policymakers in here, city, county, state. What do you want them to know when it comes to how do we advance autonomy on the roads?
Well, I know it's not exciting, but it is what Bill said, very true that, and I think Frank from Thales said it earlier as well, we've got a system of systems here that we need to be dealing with. Systems that have been around for a long time, that have a lot of policy roots in them. And so when we are introducing autonomy, whether, as Bill said, it's on our roadways, whether it's on our roadways in fleets or transit vehicles or passenger vehicles, whether it's in air, there are traditional policies that have been in place and practices that have been in place for years that the DOT is responsible for, and city and county transportation agencies are responsible for. And so while it's exciting and the benefits associated with autonomy are great, we will only recognize that excitement and those benefits if we look at how to modernize the policies and practices that are in place for those pieces of infrastructure. So we also in Minnesota are very grateful and fortunate to have a number of partners in the private sector who are working very closely with us on some of the projects I mentioned earlier, also from the academic side of the world, and they are helping us navigate through identifying where there are pinch points in policy, where we need to be modernizing things. So I would like to just say that this is a long journey that we're on in peeling away those layers of policy to modernize them. And so while we're excited to continue working on projects, I think every project that we do has to have that nod toward the technology piece and that nod and understanding toward the policy side of things.
Same thing?
Great.
Same question?
Yeah,
No,
same question, yes.
So government is inherently risk adverse. So it does not, it has built-in systems and reward systems to not change. And so the idea is to work with government to make them comfortable, whether that be an agency like a Department of Transportation at the state level, a regional MPO, we call them a Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is a regional transportation organization, a city or a county, whether that be the Congress, the United States Department of Transportation, the Federal Aviation Administration, which was talked about earlier today, or even a state legislature. By the way, we have a great state legislature that has been an enormously powerful partner with us in being able to do the things that we've been able to do, and I want to thank them for that. But government in general is inherently risk adverse, and so we have to create the ecosystem where it's comfortable for them to change. And that it implies so many, again, we could talk about it for a long time, but that question alone implies so many different aspects of what we have to do as policymakers to be able to create the ecosystems that they are allowed to make the decisions in a timely way to support technology deployment in the field. And I think that has probably been one of the most interesting parts of the journey between, for me at least, between working in the private sector and then coming to the public service, is this idea of the connective tissue between the two, and how the private sector oftentimes knows what it wants, knows what it needs to do, has ecosystems to develop it, incredible resources to be able to develop it, and frankly, accomplishment in this space, and then falls short when it comes to government because they don't understand it.
Interesting. So, I never think about this when I'm driving down the road, but, when you start thinking about what's the city, county, state, federal, it seems like it gets really complicated real quick. Where do you think, from a policy standpoint, where do you think the biggest opportunity lies in? Is it like, is it all have to be top down from the federal kind of policy? Can the state do it? Can cities or counties do it? Like, where do you see the opportunity for the innovation to come from?
Well, I think the innovation is happening at all of those levels right now. And while the federal government has, through USDOT, provided some level of guidance on kind of the roles of agencies along the way, as well as the roles of industry, and they've had a clear recognition that we're in a bit of this chaos period, good chaos in the sense of innovation. And they've tried to, I think, refrain or hold back from putting too much policy in place too soon. So I think in this chaos period, we have seen involvement at all of those levels of government in spotty ways. But we now have entered this stage where, with some local legislation that's been established at the state level, we are developing a bit of a patchwork quilt of regulation, where, as you said in introducing us, Andrew, when I'm traveling in a vehicle, I don't know when I cross from Moorhead into North Dakota, except for the Great Welcome sign, of course. But my car doesn't certainly change what it's doing. I don't change what I'm doing as a driver. And so we do need consistency. We need consistency, and that comes oftentimes from regulation. But of course, the balance we have to strike is regulation not constraining the innovation along the way.
I'd say, it's interesting. It depends on the technology and depends on the deployment environment. So if it's a defense technology in the defense space, it's going to be the federal government, and frankly, other world governments are going to be able to, and that's the target really, to try and get them to understand the implications of the technology and the policy implications of the technology, and how they can reconstruct their policy, both fiscal policy and then defense policy or national security policy around that. But in the transportation space, we're very, the federal government has a role, and so do state governments. And it's really those two at the same time. And there are parts of the transportation space where the federal government wants to take the lead, and there's parts of the transportation space where the state government wants to take the lead, and it's just understanding that. And so it's based on technology-specific application in the field. I'm saying that to say this. My work is really about integrated systems thinking. It looks at the entire system, the ecosystem of the technology deployment, whether that be a fiscal or a political or policy ecosystem or research ecosystem or a deployment ecosystem. And when we look at those ecosystems, we actually have assumptions that, yes, let's just say in transportation space, it's going to be a little bit of federal, a little bit of state. But what we look for inside of that ecosystem are these sort of windows of opportunity. They appear and they disappear inside of that space. And sometimes they're local. Sometimes they're federal, sometimes they're state, sometimes they're private sector, sometimes they're nonprofit like Grand Farm. And so we look for those openings, and then we drive the technology through that and demonstrate, and then that spark, right, illuminates the rest of the system back up through. So I don't want to leave that off the table. It's been essential for us in bringing technology to the field is to use an integrated systems approach when we're thinking about it.
Great. Before we came up on the stage here, Jenny, we were talking about the opportunities and challenges that exist for kind of the three segments you talked about earlier, rural, suburban, urban. As a rural Minnesota high school graduate, I'm really kind of curious to see your thoughts and Director Panos' thoughts on kind of the opportunities that exist for those three segments, the challenges, and kind of where you see work happening.
So clearly the opportunity, we talked a little bit about it in some of the earlier panels, that opportunity to enhance quality of life. As our population continues to age, and that becomes such a significant portion of our demographic, our ability to safely and reliably drive ourselves diminishes. And so I think there's great opportunities on the passenger side of travel and transportation in the rural community. I also think there's tremendous opportunities for automation in terms of goods movement. I came up to Fargo in the winter prior to last week, and it was, I'm not kidding you, the scariest drive I've ever had in my life. And I did think kudos to the MnDOT and North Dakota DOT maintenance crews for being able to tackle weather, because they don't really have a choice when they're out there. They're trying to make the roads safer for us. And I think about professional drivers who are moving our goods, and they also oftentimes have to push through conditions like that. And so I think there's a tremendous opportunity in our rural communities to really look at how automation can help both with passenger movement and goods movement. The project that I mentioned, we're about to launch a shuttle project in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, to look at more of those rural community dynamics around automation, both in terms of how the technology works with infrastructure, as well as how people interact with infrastructure. So whenever we're approaching a project in Minnesota, we try to look at both of those things. We're very excited to learn about the technology, because of course the vehicle side of things is not our area of expertise. And to understand that, so we can understand how it impacts our expertise on infrastructure, but we also want to understand that people element. And so the project in Grand Rapids will look at more of an on-demand type automated service and really explore not just how the technology works, but how the people aspect of it factors into acceptance, safety, and equity and accessibility.
I'd only add, I think those are all spot on, so it's great. I'm glad you're here, Ginny. The other part I would mention is and people don't always think about it this way. Again, I'm going to do an inward-facing comment here. DOT operations are kinetic operations. They are active, engaged. People are hurt and injured. Remember, mobility driving is the most dangerous thing you'll do. It's also the most dangerous thing state government does. We lose more people in DOTs than we actually do in a lot of different other areas that you would think you would lose people in. And so we're in active kinetic operations that are unpredictable. And having data, real-time data, to support those operations is critical to our success and critical to the safety of those people that are actually out there working. Let me give you one example, just in the law enforcement space alone. If we can connect our interstates, or we can connect our roads and highways, we can reduce. We have proven, and it's in the field now, we can reduce response times by half. We can keep people, especially in Fargo winters, somebody dies, they only have a certain number of minutes to live in those cold environments. We can reduce the response time for those responders to get to them. Because we use the 911 system, but we preload the 911 system by directing instantly, before the accident is completed, the nearest trooper or nearest DOT operator or nearest ambulance or nearest fire department who is nearest to that accident before ever a 911 call is ever made, before the accident's ever finished. It detects the accident, sends it to the Transportation Management Center. Transportation Management Center knows where everybody is and detects where the nearest trooper is and starts them long before the accident's finished. So they're already on their way. In Wyoming, we did this and we were able to reduce it by half. So it went from the longest response times in the United States to 20 minutes. It was 41 minutes before. So we lost people because they were in accidents. We just couldn't get to them fast enough. And so we were able to save lives instantly by just turning the switch and having connected vehicle technology in the field. So this is the promise, I think, of a lot of this technology. Is it's not about the research. It's cool research, by the way. It's not just about the AI. Incredible, by the way, what Microsoft is doing now. It's about human beings, and it's about saving lives. At the end of the day, these are tools to help people.
Sure. Awesome. Well, last question. So we did also invite our friends from South Dakota DOT. Unfortunately, they weren't able to make it. But let's end with kind of closing thoughts around regional collaboration. You know, like I said, autonomy doesn't end at the state line. How do we make that happen?
So I'm really grateful that we've actually had a long history of some regional collaboration with not only North Dakota, but South Dakota and several states to the west through a pooled fund program called the Northwest Passage, where we have exchanged for years experiences and shared and research on how to apply technology to transportation. More recently, with the lead follow technology that both Bill and I have talked about, we are both participating in an autonomous maintenance technology pooled fund that's also looking at not just where can we apply technology in our maintenance vehicles, but also some of our roadside equipment like mowing operations and so forth. And Bill also mentioned our traffic management centers, the one that North Dakota is in the process of designing. And for years, MnDOT has also had a statewide traffic management center. That ability to, even without a physical center, be able to collaborate when there are incidents, and to be able to collaborate on introducing technology to our roadways is something that I think we've had a rich history of, and we will continue to, at least I look forward to, continued opportunities to grow that between our states.
Yeah, I would only suggest that this is not something we have to build. It's already there. In other words, the transportation sector in this space, there's already massive amounts of cooperation that happen at the research level, at the operating level, at the weather level, I mean, even in our state now, where Montana is sending us data on storms that are moving across from west to east, and we're positioning equipment where the storms are, and we're bringing up equipment from where the storms aren't. And we're that specific about it. We're within a mile, and in some of the data within feet, so we can tell you mile by mile what the situation is on a road. And so that we're using that technology now, and we're able to get as close as we can to where the problems are. And that's really, really helping, I think, a lot with what we do. But that's just a small outcome from a massive sort of infrastructure, no pun intended, of cooperation that goes on with universities and with the states, with the weather services and all of that to really keep us, the United States citizens, and our goods moving, keep us safe and keep goods moving throughout the U.S. So it's already there. It's just now taking advantage of it.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Ginny and Director Panos. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. So, we talked a little bit earlier about how when we think about innovation, we kind of think about it as a Venn diagram, right? So the corporate, startups, yada, yada, yada. The corporates are often the ones that have kind of the market drive, the influence, but might not be the best at innovation. It takes a long time for that to happen, but the startups are the one where the innovation often comes through. So we're about to hear kind of a real life example of how a large corporate innovates by working with a innovative startup. So we're going to invite Josh Reedy up from Aerospace to talk about how he's partnered with Xcel Energy. And also, while Josh and the team are walking up here, yesterday he did speak at our startup brew, and while he was speaking, somebody leaned over and whispered to me that Josh is the real deal and going to be the next big thing in North Dakota. So keep up the great work, Josh.
Thank you, Andrew. Good. All right. Let everyone get set up, and you have to tell me who that is, Andrew. I have to say thank you. So, as indicated, my name is Josh Reedy. I'm the founder and CEO of a North Dakota startup that works with autonomous systems called Aerospace. And it is my great delight to be with Xcel Energy today. And I have to say, I absolutely love this conference. Last year, Senator Hoeven demonstrated our technology, and that was so much fun, so many great memories. But since that time, this group, Xcel Energy, as a large organization, has taken that technology and is adopting it in an enterprise scale. And if you think about innovation, it's one thing to have an idea. It's another to build a prototype or an MVP. It's another to commercialize that. But for this industry to get where it wants to be, we have to be able to have that technology operate at an enterprise scale. And that is what Xcel Energy is doing. If you want a glimpse of the future, go to an Xcel Energy wind site and see, this is for the second year, technicians using drones on a daily basis, people that have no business using drones otherwise. You can't imagine them doing that, and yet it's a workforce multiplier. That they have their 107, they're doing it safely, and it's a productive tool because what they're actually doing is digitizing that asset so that decision makers have the information they need when they need it most to maintain critical infrastructure. All of us like our energy, we like our fuel, we like our water, we like our wireless communications. We're trying to support that industry. When it comes to Xcel Energy, we all know the tale of David and Goliath. Imagine if they were on the same team. And in this case, Xcel is a very large organization, a utility no less, that does not necessarily have the reputation of being innovative. And yet they're working with a North Dakota startup and doing some amazing things together, and dare I say, changing the world. So this is the first opportunity to have a panel like this. I am guessing that it will certainly not be the last. So without further ado, if you want to take a moment, introduce yourself and what you do at Xcel Energy and perhaps how you're a part of this endeavor. Joe, would you like to start?
Sure. Good morning. I'm Joe Verbout. I'm the director of Generation IT, so I really manage the Generation IT services for Xcel.
I'm Amanda Nelson. I'm a senior change management consultant. I work in our operations process and performance team, which also has our UAS program on our team.
Morning, everyone. Tom Steggy. I'm the UAS program manager for Xcel, so I run all our UAS operations across the 8 states that Xcel operates in.
And I'm Nick Zicardi. I'm the CTO of Aerospace, and I get the privilege of working with these folks day in and day out.
Thank you very much. Let's start with Tom, and I think everyone in this room or most remember or know Eileen Lockhart, who was Tom's predecessor. But I want to make sure you shake Tom's hand and you get to know Tom because he is an absolute dynamo and has been wonderful to work with when it comes to all things UAS and Xcel Energy. Maybe give us your perspective on what is innovation like in a mature organization? What is challenging about being part of Xcel Energy and attempting to innovate?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I think what we see in the UAS side is Xcel is like 12,000 employees strong, and my UAS department is 6 people. So we're nothing in comparison to the field employees out there, thousands of linemen and gas employees. So having ideas and an operation to support us as being such a small aspect is we don't come with a lot of firepower, but we come with a lot of great ideas. So it takes a lot of effort for us to get those ideas up and through the levels of management and leadership to get that buy-in. But I think, like you said, when we really kicked off the wind turbine stuff is that changed the whole dynamic of, how we do work on a day-to-day basis, how we manage our data and manage our assets, and now it's flowing into, changing asset management strategies across the entire company. So, I think we've heard a little bit this morning too about like that little spark idea that starts in the bottom or starts somewhere small. You kind of get that quick, like proven, hey, this thing's gonna work, and we just keep pushing on that. And I think that's kind of the strategy that we've taken. And Aerotonomy and other startups have helped be the flexible part to go out and do this technology and get the product to work, and help us get to that point where we can start turning it around and pushing it up.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. And Joe, I want to just take a moment. Joe wasn't supposed to be on this panel. Scott was. And others might say, hey, I'm going to go get someone else that's underneath me to fill in, or they may have come in by video. Joe is actually Scott's supervisor, and the fact that Joe is with us today, I think, is a small but meaningful testament that on very short notice, literally within days, he's sitting up here with us, and I find that amazing. Joe, you've been with Xcel for some time. Maybe you can give us your perspective on, what makes innovation challenging, not only within a large organization, but a utility that has, a very meaningful role in our society in generating and delivering power.
Yeah, first of all, everybody likes the shiny object and likes to run after it, especially in the management ranks. I think the people that use the technology cringe sometimes because they don't know what's coming. But for Xcel, there's a lot of great ideas, and we try to foster those ideas from the bottom up. We have something called Shark Tank. It's a way of getting capital for those great ideas that come from the bottom up. But the reality is everybody wants the capital dollars, and it's really a kind of a fight for the best idea to get the capital to do the innovation. So what we need to do is we need to understand that innovation enough to understand the true value. And if the true value is there, then I think the capital and support from leadership will be there. And that's not always easy when it's something new, when it's something that people don't quite understand how that technology will make a difference for the company. And so that's one of our struggles, is really understanding the technology enough to deliver the value to our workforce, our business partners, and so forth. So those are the challenges we go through every day. Everybody wants to implement new ideas. I think there's a more motivation in Xcel today than there ever has been for innovation. It's just, what is the right and the best innovation?
Thank you, Joe. Amanda, you have such an interesting role, change management, which I think is often overlooked in evoking effective change and getting people to not just see that shiny object, but to adopt it as a tool and make it a meaningful part of their routine. What's your perspective?
Yeah, I think at Xcel, we're really lucky. Our senior leaders are very supportive of when it comes to innovation and understanding that it takes resources and it takes funding up front. But then you have a whole nother battle, right? So once you have that and once you have it in the company, now all of our employees, we're a very large company. We have corporate, we have field, and we're pretty spread out. And so it's really focusing on that, what's important to each employee, because everyone at the end of the day has the desire or desire not to adopt. And it's really that ultimate utilization. So while we can upfront inside of corporate come up with what's that hard savings look like, or what is the value that we're gonna get, once we've gotten past that proof of value, it's really, and I think Tom has done a really good job of this, but how do you really get out into the field and really get it into the hands of our field employees so that they see the value in it and they understand how it's really meant to be a tool to help them.
Thank you. And Nick, you get to work with these folks on a regular basis. From an Aerotonomy perspective, what makes Xcel different? Why is this unique?
Yeah, I mean, we've been working with Xcel, as demonstrated here since 2019, if not even before then. I think that relationship has been fostered, and that's in and of itself a testament that Xcel is willing to spend the time to understand new and emerging technologies, analyze their value, and then actually move forward with them. You know, that's you can see the value and then get scared and run away. And I think Xcel is courageous in so much as trying to push the boundary and understand what's possible, and then go do the things that even seem impossible. And now here we are.
Nick's comments make me feel blessed because we have had the opportunity to work with Xcel early on, and we consider them a partner, and they're a co-developer now, which is an extraordinary relationship. But it's one that I don't see often, especially in this industry. I see customers, but not those true partnerships over years that affect meaningful change. Joe, maybe you want to give a sense of, what do you see coming from this type of relationship? Perhaps why is working with small companies, innovators, important for organizations like Xcel?
It's always a risk for Xcel. We always pick the biggest companies because we think that's lower risk. And I think we come to realize that those people that we can build a trusting relationship, those companies that we can gain confidence in their capability are the ones that we really need to move towards. And it doesn't matter the size. But a lot of times we do a viability check on the company and make sure that company's going to be there for the long term. And so there's a little reluctance to take some risks. And what we're learning is that the rate of change at which we want to go through to innovate and drive forward, we need to partner with other companies. We can't develop it in-house. We just don't have the time and talent. And there's a lot of time, there's a lot of talent out there in these other companies that we could partner with and get where we want to go much faster. And I think that's a way of doing business. We haven't done that in the utility space in the past. This is new. In fact, developing the contract with Air Autonomy was something we struggled with at first because our supply chain didn't know quite how to handle all these partnership things we want to do. So, but I think it's the right way, right direction for Xcel instead of trying to organically grow that talent, because I don't think we'll ever have it, to partner with other vendors and businesses to drive to our new strategy and where we want to go.
Love that insight, Joe. Absolutely love it. Tom, I can only imagine how many companies knock on your door trying to sell you something or to get you to see a demonstration. From your perspective, what do you want to see out of a small company or a startup working within your space? What's important to you?
Yeah, I think one of our biggest factors that we're looking for is flexibility and how useful it can be across our business. Because we do everything from, I guess, over the last year, my drone team's done everything from commercial video shoots for our commercials on TV to nuclear power plant inspections to transmission line inspections to land surveying. So our area of business, while it doesn't immediately come up front to the general public, is huge. So we want to use drones everywhere we can, and that means that we have to be flexible. We don't want to have to use one drone on Monday for this job, go back to the office, grab another one for the job on Tuesday. We want to have some commonality, standardization, and flexibility across our assets. So whether that's hardware or software, how these things intermix is how can we get the most value for one product or one solution?
Yeah. Is it fair to say, Tom, that when I hear you speak, you're looking now from a different viewpoint? You're looking across the entire organization, doing this at scale, and perhaps, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but encouraging people in this room to understand what scale means so that drones, autonomous systems, the data they produce is not kept on the periphery of the organization. It's brought into the organization so that it adds value, that it's a meaningful expenditure. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you look at us, probably our two top values are employee safety and keeping the power on for our customers. Drones don't immediately come to mind when you think about those two things, but as you peel back, what that means, that opens up the broadness of our business. As employee safety is everyone from in the office to driving around on the DOT roads. That was a very hazardous environment, to working on a bucket truck on the side of the road, to out in the middle of a field doing transmission line. So there's just a huge impact, and we just want to make sure that employee safety is still held high. And if we can use this tool across that to impact it in multiple ways, that just helps us take that to the next level, further the investment, further the opportunity there.
Thank you. I do appreciate that. Joe mentioned that it was an adventure, and working with Xcel to be one of one, to blaze a trail. There's another side to that coin, and I'd ask Nick, from a startup perspective, especially as a CTO, someone that works with the technology, works with the team, what have you learned about, working with Xcel, working with large corporations? What guidance could you give those in the audience?
Yeah, I mean, when I think back to that particular time as we were working through the contract negotiations and trying to figure out, hey, how do we actually bring this into Xcel in a reasonable way that gives us viability? But I think what comes to mind most readily is the importance for startups and for small businesses and for organizations to maintain a laser focus on customer value. How do I offer value in terms of the business that I'm serving? Because me and me specifically, and of course some of my engineers and team get very focused on the shiny object, because drones are cool. The flying lawnmower over our heads is a blast to see flying, and especially when it's doing it on its own, and it's a little terrifying sometimes. But we have to remember that drone is collecting imagery that's enabling us to turn on our coffee pots in the morning, that are able to maintain a ventilator in a hospital, that's able to keep the lights on for the DOT. And if we lose focus of that and focus on the autonomous systems instead of the value that they provide, I think we miss the mark. And that's, I think, what I learned.
Thank you very much. Amanda, question for you. We're doing this together because we believe in the value of having readily available information about assets at scale. But there's a whole lot of change. If you just look at the sum of all the moving parts that makes it possible, for any of you that wants to imagine that, imagine driving from here to the cities and just look at the transmission lines on the side of the road. And you drive by a nuclear plant, and you drive by wind turbines. There's so much infrastructure, so many moving pieces. What are some of those challenges, and how do you help people overcome those challenges to adopt something new and different and better?
Yeah, so when we think about change management, everything's changing at all times. And how do you really help focus on, of all these different elements, what should you be focused on the most? And really it's, when you really look at the strategic priorities, or what's most important, or how are we gonna get to the goals that have been set for our company, really focusing on those elements based on who your audience is, or who the person is that you're talking to, even within the company. And I think, sometimes you need change stop, and understanding, hey, great idea or great element or great something, but maybe not appropriate for all, or maybe not right now. And that change saturation. And it's really aligning all the different elements that are expected to change, and doing that kind of assessment of what's gonna provide the least risk, the most value, what's gonna align within what our goals are, and really drive those.
Absolutely. I cannot imagine, and yet you're doing it, and I find that absolutely incredible. Tom, what do people think? Maybe not so much your team of 6, but if you were to reflect on the wind sites, and when they were asked to do what they're doing today with UAS and the technology, what did you find challenging about that? What were some takeaways that you could share?
I think to give some background is Xcel's got about 2,000 wind turbines across our company, and even just a handful of years ago, we were only doing tens to hundreds of wind turbine inspections a year, because it was all manual. It was either, you get a 500-foot man basket or man lift, which is quite an amazing feat to see, or you've got guys hanging off the wind turbine blades with ropes and winder washer platforms. You go back to, what was it, 2019 was the first year?
Yeah, I think so.
We did 2,000 wind turbine inspections in about 4.5 months. Every blade got documented, every blade got organized. There's AI in the background to inspect all the imagery and send that off to our engineers and management. And I think just as, like Amanda's been saying, we threw a whole lot of hardware, a whole lot of software, a whole lot of new process development, and a whole lot of new thought at these guys. I think there was probably some initial pushback because there's been some hiccups and lessons learned along the way. But just kind of taking that approach of, like we're doing still now, just, crawl, walk, run, just stepping through, can we get to an MVP product? And then can we push that out for feedback and continue to improve? So, kind of working in, it's going to be a big change up front, but can we break it up into small sections where we're still getting additional value built on top of each of those blocks each time? And that's just, some of how we've fought some of the pushback or tried to prevent some of the bad user experience, we'll say.
Yeah, and I want to stress that I know of no other use of drones at scale in that type of environment by non-professional pilots. I want to just take a moment to reflect on that is truly incredible. The number of sites, the diversity of site, and yet it's in year 2. And Nick, maybe you want to take just a moment, talk about year 1 versus year 2. When I look at year 2 and how that group is adopted and adapted so much, some of the biggest issues are realizing you can't store batteries outside in the wintertime, things of that nature. Can you talk about that transition from year 1 to year 2 and how you see it progressing?
Yeah, sure, and we could certainly talk about the limitations of lithium-ion as well if we want to. And honestly, we laugh and joke, but that's actually something to note. These folks that were dropping these very complicated, very high-tech pieces of equipment in front of them, they maybe genuinely just don't know that you can't store it in a particular way that will result in a whole case full of dead batteries when they try and turn it on, after the snow is gone. And so we've had to learn a number of those kinds of lessons, Josh, where we've had to walk through, hey, what do you do in these kinds of situations, and how do we train you to be effective with the technology and both not injure yourself, not injure the equipment, but also, and most importantly, again, staying focused on the value, deliver the value that you want. I think the memory that comes most rapidly to my brain is when they realized a lightning storm came through and they knew a couple turbines had been hit, and they're like, oh, well, can't we just go get the data now? And it was like, bing! Light bulb, yeah, that's why we put it in your hands. Go get the data now and see whether or not any of your blades need fixing. And that's, not just the programmatic inspections that we enable, but also now the rapid response and enablement of the technology to find just-in-time information. It's really a game changer in terms of the industry. And as we roll that out across Xcel for a variety of other use cases, we're starting to see those same light bulbs go off. So in some ways, stay the course has been a big part of it.
Yeah, and I want to stress that if you think of an ecosystem that has hardware and software and pilots, drones are being used not just for an annual inspection, they're being used on an as-needed basis. There's more hardware being sold, there's more people using the tool, there's more data being generated. It's good for the ecosystem, and we're strong believers in ecosystem. We're going to close, and then we felt strongly about having some time for Q&A from the audience. So Joe, there's a lot of moving pieces with this. I mean, a lot. We talk about the drones, but when you think about robotics and automation, data is really what's most important for Xcel. The ability to make decisions. If you don't mind, close your eyes, think forward 5 years. I won't say 10 like earlier, but think forward 5 years. What's success if this is done correctly and this is adopted by Xcel Energy?
Well, other than I'm retiring by then, no, to be honest, if you think 5 years out, right now everything is kind of new and it's a pilot or a test case, and we're using drones in a lot of different areas. We do boiler inspections. Anytime we have to resurrect scaffolding, that's a perfect application for a drone. So we're constantly doing new things with these drones and collecting the image. And with Air Autonomy's application, we're bringing it into the cloud, able to tie that drone information to a real asset. And then we make some decisions on it, right? Based on the imagery and inspection data. So 5 years from now, hopefully none of that it's just automatically moving. It's going. The information and the data is making the decision. We're doing a lot with ML and AI right now, but all of it is kind of unproven. It's the confidence isn't there in that process yet, but it's starting to deliver value. Hopefully 5 years from now, we trust the AI and the machine learning, and it is making our decisions for us. We could automatically do inspection of a wind turbine blade, and that can be automatically done with no human interaction, to be honest. The data's there and the output's there, and it feeds into our bigger system. We got a huge system that monitors every single asset we have in generation, and it tells us when we have risk, and the risk flags that asset for maintenance. All that's automatically done, running seamlessly. The integrations are seamlessly done, and the employees know how to use all that technology, and it's an enabler for them to get their job done really efficiently, and there's not a lot of barriers. So hopefully 5 years from now, we're looking like that.
That sounds great. And Amanda, I ask you the same question. Putting on your change management hat, what's success look like 5 years from now?
Well, I think that, we've done a really good job of not just trying to push this in top down, but really once we had our leadership support, which luckily we have 100% wholeheartedly, it was really, I think they were able to come in and fail fast, if you will, or learn their lessons in a small controlled environment, and now it's really speaking for itself. And so for us to be able to get to a point where we can make fast, data-driven decisions, increase safety, decrease risk, and be able to really focus in a world that's so fastly changing, what do we want to focus on? And how do we do it from, organically get that utilization, ultimate adoption? So 5 years from now, I would like to see our drone program be mass used across the company and really, protect our employees and give us that right now information and have that live data.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And again, so proud of these people and many, many others. Sometimes I think we know as much about Xcel Energy as anyone because we've had that opportunity to go across the entire organization, but truly fascinating what they do and give them all the credit in the world. We had time for a few questions. I don't know if there's any interest in asking those questions, but anyone have questions for this panel? Anyone at all? Oh, there's one right over there.
Was a learning experience for you both. If the relationship were to begin today, what would both parties do differently?
That's a great question. Great question. Anyone want to take a stab at that from Xcel?
I can. I think what we need to do as a company is to have a format, a structure, a template for doing this. So one thing I'd make sure that, and we recognize that already, that we're starting to build that template. So when we want to partner with another business area or vendor, that we can do that seamlessly. It shouldn't be a big deal. Secondly, I would say that understanding the future of where we're going, that vision, and creating some milestones to show that we're on track for that vision. Because we need to keep the confidence of our upper leadership, and they want to know what value we're getting from that solution. A lot of these programs are anywhere from 1 to 5 years. It doesn't end after a year. And so we got to continue to have that capital to drive that program forward, and we need our leadership support and not just with the capital, but changing the organization, like Amanda said, the buy-in to adopting this new technology.
Wise words that I hope all my fellow startups are hearing with this.
I wanted to add, I think Xcel does a really good job of its focus and partnership and commitment to partnering with small businesses. I think one of the key things, and Tom said earlier, is, there was the obvious and upfront where UAS can provide value to Xcel, but we've learned so much in where else it has started to provide value that wasn't necessarily obvious up front. And so I would say it's definitely worth the effort and the energy to really try and pull back the layers of that onion, if you will, and really present that more up front of where, and some of it you're just gonna have to learn as time goes on, but as much of it as you can figure out ahead of time.
I appreciate that. Time for one more question. Yes, sir. There.
So this is towards Amanda. Great to have you on the panel, and yeah, to hear from it. A lot of us don't have the advantage of having one of you in that role, and I think that's a key thing that's often overlooked because everybody's trying to implement or whatnot. Any tips or pointers as start out? Because I think we look at adopting technology and whatnot, but from your side of it, as far as helping with that change management and how to get that implemented internally, because as you mentioned, organic growth is probably the best way to do it. So any tips that you can maybe help us as we look at that?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think change management just in the last few years has really started to become a key leg or key standalone element within any kind of adoption or within many organizations. I think it's understanding that everyone has a say in whether or not they're going to change. There's a behavioral science to it. It's not just having an awareness of what your company is trying to do. It's how do you create that desire that your employees are willing to adopt. They have an option. They have I'm sure we've all seen it, but they have the ability to be like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm going to keep doing it how I've always done it. And it's really focusing on, understanding and making sure that even all the way down to your frontline leaders, they understand that they have a role in that. They have a responsibility, and not just, here's another email from corporate, but actually building up that desire within their teams and understanding that, that needs to be entrenched and ingrained in our cultures, and baked into our trainings, baked into whether it's in our performance expectations or performance reviews. And it's, really trying to get that mature model within a very mature organization. And so I'd say focus on the behavioral science and understand that there's always an option for employees, and that's where your biggest aspect is that you're gonna have to overcome.
If I could, Josh, can I just add one small thing there is, from the startup or the business side, trying to offer value into an enterprise or really any organization, remember that you're coming in and upsetting an apple cart. And you're changing something that likely works, and something that somebody has probably spent a significant amount of effort going, okay, go. And okay, nobody touch it, right? And you're gonna come in and sweep it all away, potentially. Just remember that and have a little bit of empathy for the reality that there's a person on the other side that's invested a lot of effort into it, and you're there to help them and enable them, not destroy them. And I think that's something that we've done very well, and I wish I would do it even better in the future.
Thank you for everyone. I see Tony and others over there. Thank you for the chance, Xcel Energy, for the economic development. Thank you for Emerging Prairie to do this, and thank you for people like Greg Tavine working their butts off to make this happen. So, pleasure.
All right, thank you. All right, so next up, we're going to hear from the CEO and co-founder of Edison Aerospace, and he is Gene Avakyn. Where are you? There you are.
Hi. I'd like to start with a story that spans 10,000 years and involves innovation in agriculture. Since our ancestors began cultivating crops, we've had cycles of innovation that raised crop yields that kept feeding a larger and larger population. These cycles enabled us to develop knowledge that in turn produced more innovation, and so on and so forth. Population went from 5 million in 8000 BC to almost 8 billion today. But if we look at a graph of this growth, we see it exploding in the last 200 years. This coincides with the Industrial Revolution and discovery of oil. This boom is set to reach 10 billion by year 2050, and crop production will need to double to handle this. The alternative to this, to doubling the production, is famine and starvation. So there's really not much choice about proceeding. And the acceleration of innovation that followed these events is truly amazing when we look at the 20th century. Only 60 years separate the Wright brothers' first flight from man walking on the moon, and we're still accelerating from this. But since nothing lasts forever, there's a problem with this boom. It was all powered by oil. Oil supplies are limited, and total production and reserves are in decline. This means that what got us here will not get us there. The pollution caused by burning fossil fuels still chokes many cities and has left permanent marks behind as well. So the big question is, how do we create the next egg evolution to feed still more people in the cycle of technology racing ahead of an approaching tidal wave of population growth? Electricity is the best choice to replace oil, but we've still got challenges to overcome. We've got to improve storage density and come up with cleaner ways of producing power, including more efficient renewable methods. The US still burns fossil fuels to get 60% of its power, and that is a big problem. Some use cases for electrification simply aren't practical yet, but many others are. We can't make an electric airliner today, but Tesla has already sold 2 million great cars. However you look at it, the long-term trend is for oil prices to rise and electricity costs to decline. I decided to make a small contribution to help the process of this change. I've set a crazy goal of replacing existing spray aircraft with electrical autonomous models, but then they used to call Elon Musk crazy, and when he told us that we'd buy his cars one day, and now we have. The reason why this will succeed is, and why the spray operators will make the switch, are manifold. This is one use case that can be electrified and automated today, quickly and profitably, for the benefit of all parties involved, not just for the company selling their aircraft. Aerial application is vital for agriculture at scale, and the last 100 years have seen this industry grow tremendously. However, fossil fuel egg aircraft burn 125 million gallons of fuel and kill about 10 pilots annually in the US alone. And that's about a quarter of the world's use of aircraft for this. They also cost their operators so much to buy and operate that they work on tight margins, are at the mercy of fuel prices, have no pricing flexibility, and thus can't expand their services to more farms to help them raise their yields. Take fuel costs, for example. An average turbine burns about 50 gallons of fuel an hour, which is just under $300. Our aircraft would use about $14 in electricity over the same hour operation, covering almost the same acreage. What about maintenance? The rebuild of a turbine required every 3,600 hours costs about $400,000 of a regular aircraft. And that's about the price of our entire aircraft. And the maintenance cost for which will be about 1/10 of this amount for the same number of hours flown. This puts into perspective how electric vehicles can positively affect agriculture, and are much more than a green fad. So what does our solution look like? Our first model will be about the size of a Cessna 172, carrying 200 gallons of payload. This will be followed by a bigger model, about the size of a Cessna Caravan, with about 400 gallons of payload on board. As you can see, I don't believe in halfway measures. Our aircraft will be a direct replacement for our customers' existing aircraft, and these customers are already licensed and certified and have an existing client base at their service. So it's a drop-in replacement for current products in use. This, to me, is a formula for quick market adoption. We're aiming at a segment of the aviation industry that will be most receptive to our aircraft, and one that has no direct competitors to our product except for traditional aircraft. We're solving customers' existing pain points. What are they? High acquisition costs, volatile energy prices, high maintenance costs, inability to compete on price, and pilot safety. I think we all want to see farmers and spray operators run more profitable businesses and stay in the industry and make it more resilient as a result. I see this as an ultimate win-win scenario for the egg industry and the end consumers overall. It's up to us to take agriculture to its next evolution as we move beyond the oil boom period. This is not just about Edison Aerospace or labels. Mine is only a small part of the big picture. It's about agriculture, food security, and our future on this planet. This is an existential question and will be answered one way or another, with billions of lives hanging in the balance. And events like this are exactly the right way to move forward and find the answer. So let's save the world together. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Gene. And he is actively exploring North Dakota and going after some of the great business incentives in the state. So hopefully we'll be seeing more of you, Gene. All right, well, we're going to take a little break here, and we will reconvene at 11:30 to hear some great more, and we'll welcome up our fantastic U.S. Senator John Hoeven when we get back. We'll see you back here at 11:30.